All right, so thank you everybody for joining us for the Hallowed Harvest Speaker Series. High Country Lifelong Learners is a social group of older adults in the local Boone community that share a love of learning about new topics and ideas. We have partnered with the Watauga County Public Library to provide this program today. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to enjoy this exciting opportunity. At the end, we will be asking a 3-question satisfaction survey. So if you want to stay with us till then, we would really appreciate that. Now we would like to start off by introducing Dr. Jill Juris, who is assisting and directing High Country Lifelong Learners.
Thanks, Kate. I am a recreation management faculty member here at Appalachian State University, and I focus on creating community-based programs, especially with an intergenerational connection. So today we have students from a recreation management program planning class that are assisting with this program today, and we're excited to be continuing the High Country Lifelong Learners program via Zoom. And so in meeting with Judith Phoenix and Ingrid Hayes over the last few months, I've stepped in to help continue this programming. And we appreciate everyone joining us today, and we'll record this session for those of you who could not join us at this specific time. And I'd like to thank the students for all of their planning and technology efforts to get this rolling. And they've created a website for High Country Lifelong Learners that we'll put in the chat so that we can provide information about future programs. And this also comes through the Watauga County Public Library's newsletter and is on their website. And so at this point, I'll pass it over to Foster, who can help give some technology tips before we get started.
Hi, my name is Foster. If you would like to, if you haven't used Zoom before, down the bottom left-hand corner, if you scroll over, like just with your mouse, it'll show like a little microphone, and that's where you can click to mute and unmute yourself. And if you would like to, you can show your face if you would, if you hit video, the video button right next to it. There's also a chat feature in the bottom right if you hit more and you go to the chat, the little bar, and then you can type in your questions there if you really don't want to speak. Once you find you can also ask questions or comments, ask using the chat or just talking, as Major Tom has already said. You can, please let me know please let any of us know if the chat is not working at any point or you can't hear the speaker or having any other technical difficulties.
Thank you, Foster. Now we would like to introduce today's guest speaker. Mr. Tom Randolph is a full-time park ranger at Mount Jefferson State Park, along with being an adjunct professor at Appalachian State, teaching interpretive methods. Without further ado, please welcome our guest speaker, Ranger Tom Randolph.
Hey, thank you so much for inviting me and for having me over here, and a nice introduction. I am a park ranger up here at Mount Jefferson. I've been up here about 17 years, and I've worked all over the United States, including up in Alaska. My last park was Death Valley National Park, a very hot park. When I first moved there, I was like, how hot could it be? It's really hot there. So we were really glad to come here and spend the last 17 years up here on the mountain. And I'm going to be sharing with you a PowerPoint and maybe some pictures and some poetry. And also I really like to leave it open for the students and all the participants. If you have questions, just feel free to ask as we go along. So I'll go ahead and share my screen, and I am, let's see, good. Can y'all see my screen okay? Okay, good. So I like to kind of do a chronological history. Sometimes when I'm just doing an orientation to a location, it helps me to kind of figure out where I am and what the story is. And I'm sure I'm going to be leaving things out, and there are definitely details that could be added. Something I'm really learning about history is it just depends on the person telling the story is where the history really comes from. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. And if you say, well, what about this side of the story? Just go ahead and feel free to ask. Let's see. So a few years ago, I guess about 5 years ago, we had a celebration. We celebrated Mount Jefferson becoming a state park. And we became a state park back in 1956. But during the celebration a few years ago, we had music up on the mountain. We had lots of music, a little bit of dancing. We had crafts and activities going on. A lot of people from the community were out to really enjoy the day. And it was a fall day like it is today. And we also did painting because we do a lot of painting up on Mount Jefferson. I like to provide free art programs, making t-shirts, painting pictures. We provide all the materials for free. And we do this regularly, but we wanted to kind of have all this available during this event a few years ago. So we do a lot of painting up on the mountain, and some really neat art comes out over the years I've seen people do. But Mount Jefferson's story really goes back a lot further than 5 years. We can go back quite a ways. Let's say about 850 million years. So that's a good ways back. Now, 850 million years, I can't grasp what that means. I don't even have the slightest idea what 850 million years looks like. But our geologists tell us that around 850 million years ago, there were volcanoes here in this area. Now, keep in mind, this is a time period before Pangea existed, way before the Atlantic Ocean was even around. So, and certainly back, before the dinosaurs and all that. So this is to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about when I throw the number 850 million years, like it's, something I did before lunch. It's nothing like that. This is a long time ago. So these volcanoes erupted, spewed out what we call igneous rock. Igneous means born of fire. So that's one of the 3 main rock types. Spewed out, and then it started to settle out into shallow bays that were forming around this region. As far as we can tell, these shallow bays allowed for what's called a sedimentary rock to form. So we have compression, compaction, layer upon layer, compression, compaction of rock started to settle, mixing with this igneous rock that came out of the volcanoes and settled at the bottom of a shallow sea or shallow bays. Well, geology is things are constantly moving. And if y'all remember a few years ago, there was a nuclear power plant in Japan that got hit by a tsunami, the Fukushima plant. That was partially because of what's called a subduction zone. And this picture here kind of shows what happened with our rock that was down at the bottom of that shallow sea. The rock got pushed down, one layer got pushed underneath the other. So the rock got pushed down underneath the earth, and it settled down there for a long, long time. Remember, this is way, way back. So it's down there and it's sitting under the earth, and it's warmer down under the earth. So we have a lot of heat and pressure that's pushing on this rock, making what we call amphibolite today. But I don't want to jump too far ahead of the story. So you can see these layers here. So this stuff gets all smushed up. And if you go walking around Mount Jefferson in certain places, you can see where the rock is all contorted, where it was all kind of pushed under this heat and pressure. But the rock was underground. So something had to happen to get it up here to the surface. And something did happen. Now we've moved to the fairly recent, almost like yesterday, 300 million years ago. So not quite yesterday, but 300 million years ago, again, the Atlantic Ocean still had not formed. So if you have ever been out to the ocean, been out to Jockey's Ridge, and looked out at that vast void of water, Mount Jefferson was formed before that ocean was ever created. So to kind of give you an idea how old this mountain is. So the continents came together, like the picture there at the top. Africa and North America came together and started to form these supercontinents. And when that happened, it created a wrinkle basically from Maine all the way down to Georgia. And that wrinkle we call the Appalachian Mountains. And that wrinkle also caused the rock that was down under the earth. Remember that amphibolite sitting down there under the earth? It got pushed up. And when it got pushed up, it formed these amazing mountains. They must have been very, very stark. Geologists tell us they were probably about 20,000 feet high. So imagine something like the Rocky Mountains or Mount Everest. Keep in mind, the Rockies and Mount Everest are new mountains. The Appalachians are ancient mountains. These are some of the oldest mountains in the world. So when you see a giant, beautiful mountain like Mount Everest or Rocky Mountains or something like that, you're looking at new mountains. They haven't really been weathered too much yet. They're just been pushed up fairly recently in their geologic time. So as these mountains were all pushed up in this very different landscape, things started to happen. And basically what we call that is weathering. There are two basic types of weathering. There's physical and chemical weathering. And Mount Jefferson is pretty much prone to what we call the physical weathering process. So the mountain was pushed up, and this is a picture from up near the snow gate, just beyond the first overlook. You can see the amphibolite rock, and it also has all these little cracks in it. And the cracks are really key to the whole weathering process of why Mount Jefferson's not 20,000 feet high today. And it's only 4,683 feet today, more or less. So a little quick moment just to kind of give you an idea about the rock itself. If you brushed your teeth this morning, you probably used something that came out of this rock here. This is called fluorite, and this is where our fluoride comes from. Fluoride, if you notice, it's a number 4 on the mole's hardness scale. And there is a scale that a geologist came up with, and I thought, what a great name if you're a geologist to be Dr. Mole. Well, Mole came up with this scale, and he basically is like, okay, I want to get an idea of what are the let's make a scale from the softest rock, which is talc, to the hardest rock, which is, any guesses on the hardest rock on the earth? It's my coffee break one, waiting for you to figure that one out.
Say diamond.
Diamond, yeah. I didn't even get to have a sip. You got it. Yeah, diamond. That's the hardest rock. So that's a 10 on the mole's hardness scale. Talc is a 1. Amphibolite that Mount Jefferson is made out of is about a 5. So pretty much all the rocks can be labeled by a different hardness. One of the other big rocks that we have up here on Mount Jefferson is this. This is quartz, and it's a 7 on the mole's hardness scale. So here's our quartz there. So that's part of the deal. When you think about rocks and weathering, you have to think about, well, how hard is this rock? And then you have to think about time as well. Now, to give you an idea of the time scales here, you can kind of see a little bit, pretty much like the whole idea of the French Revolution, Columbus, the fall of Rome, first writings and all that. All of that stuff that we, kind of think of as important in our human existence, all happened in that little teeny thing left of the yellow on the bottom scale down there. That all happened just fairly recently. Mount Jefferson is way over here forming in the 300 million year time scale. That kind of gives you an idea how, so pretty much most of all human existence happened in that little teeny blip right here in the history of our planet. Mount Jefferson's way over here. So the weathering process has been going on for a long time. So what is weathering? So Mount Jefferson's up here, a lot of times I'll ask the kids here locally, I'll say, have you ever had your parents say, hey, we're going to leave the water running in the bathroom tonight? Why would you leave the water running in your bathroom at night in the winter?
Because if they freeze, then like it says, the water will expand and it'll bust your pipes.
Exactly. Yeah. And the kids know that up here. So yeah. And that picture there with the water coming out, that's a pipe that the water expanded and it busted the pipe. And the picture down below actually shows the molecular structure of water as it turns into a crystal. It actually turns into a crystal when it freezes, and it expands. Most other things contract when they freeze. Water expands, and that expansive force has been getting into those cracks in the rock, expanding when it gets cold, and then busting the rock. The rock gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it eventually becomes soil. Now, we have poetry contests up here, and I'd like to play a poem written by a student who wrote about the rocks and about this process that goes on up here at Mount Jefferson. I started a poetry contest about 15 years ago, and we've gotten some really good poems. So this is a poet describing Mount Jefferson's.
We can't hear it. Mr. Tom. We can't hear the presentation. Oh. Ranger Tom, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, we couldn't hear the poem.
Oh,
You'd
okay.
have to unshare your screen, and then reshare it, and you should be able to share the audio
Okay.
in the settings, I think.
In the settings. Okay. Yeah, I was like, okay. Um, let's see.
There's
And
just one
this,
checkbox in the, I think it's the lower corner that says share audio.
is it under the where mute is?
When you go, act like you're going to go share your screen and then click on what you want to share. And then in that box, it should have share audio.
Gotcha. Okay, click on it. Share sound. I forgot about that. I love technology. Okay. Okay. Here we go. Let's try it again. Okay. Well, it's a pretty picture, at least while you were listening. It's like, okay, I was inspired. All right. Give me a thumbs up if you hear it. Let's see. Okay.
My name is Trenton Miller, and I won first place in poetry with science. Here's my poem. Magnificent Rocks of Mount Jefferson. Magnificent rocks of Mount Jefferson, 800 million years ago. Midnight black amphibolite, the mountain forming so slow. Magnificent rocks of Mount Jefferson, quartz with crystal shapes. Erosion remains a mystery, complex geology geologists face. Magnificent rocks of Mount Jefferson, layers of an ancient plateau. From sedimentary to metamorphic, at the base the new river flows. Magnificent rocks of Mount Jefferson, feldspar and Marco bound. Reorganized and recrystallized, as metamorphic sweet has been found.
A lot of geology in that poem. And this student won the Poetry of Science Award. And we have, over the years, invited the Poet Laureate of North Carolina as they come and go over the years to help judge the contest. And that student won the Poetry of Science. So what's going on with our rocks here? You go up on Mount Jefferson, you don't see, 20,000 foot mountain. You see this 4,683 foot mountain. And why isn't there a big pile of dirt that's 4,000 or 20,000 feet high? Where's all the rock been going? Well, it's been broken into pieces and then it becomes soil. And that soil goes through another process that's called erosion. And I have the exit sign up there because exit starts with the letter E, just like the word erosion starts with the letter E. Erosion is the process of moving stuff away. That's how it exits. Weathering is what breaks it down. It's like I'm holding this rock here. It's not going anywhere. I get blown off. It's not going anywhere. But if I broke it down into the size of, say, a grain of sand and blew on it, it would exit, and that would be erosion. So that's what's been going on with Mount Jefferson. Now, the really neat thing that most people that when they come to the park don't realize is when Mount Jefferson becomes soil, Mount Jefferson's soil is really unique. It's different than Grandfather Mountain soil or Grayson Highlands or Pisgah. When I'm talking about an amphibolite mountain, I'm talking about Elk Knob, maybe the Bluff, which is managed by the Nature Conservancy here, Patty Mountain, Mulata Mountain, Mount Jefferson. These mountains are all made out of amphibolite soil, and all of their soil is neutral. Most of your Appalachian mountains are considered to be acidic soils, but Mount Jefferson soils are neutral. And when we became a state park, nobody really realized that, or at least it wasn't well known. So that is part of the reason why we are a national natural landmark, is because of this neutral pH of the soil. These are the mountains that I'm talking about right here, just this little pocket with the circle around it. Those are the amphibolite mountains. And these amphibolite mountains are the home, like Mount Jefferson has a mafic glade. And most of y'all probably never heard of a mafic glade. That's because there are only two on the entire planet, on the earth. There's one on Mount Jefferson and there's one on the Bluff, which is managed by the Nature Conservancy. Those are the only two mafic glades on earth. So people started to realize, researchers started to realize there was something really special here. But kind of going back in time, just to think about Mount Jefferson and our chronological timeline, the weathering has been going on, it's been broken down. We get to say 10,000 years ago, if you go up to Saltville, Virginia, an hour from here, you'll find the bones of mammoth and mastodon. If you go over to gray fossil beds in Tennessee, an hour and a half from here, you'll find saber-toothed tiger fossils. Mount Jefferson's rock doesn't really form fossils, but that doesn't mean these animals weren't here. Probably right where App State is. I bet you there were mammoth and mastodons and saber-toothed tigers running around 10,000 years ago. Something you wouldn't want to run into on campus, but kind of next time you walk across campus out in Durham Park, imagine a mastodon or a saber-toothed tiger running around out there. So that's 10,000 years ago in this area. And Mount Jefferson, as it's been weathered down, this is a view of it from the Blue Ridge Parkway, has become an isolated mountain or an Inselberg. We also call it an island in the sky. And off in the distance here in this picture, the mountain directly behind, this is from Luther Rock. This is the ridge on Mount Jefferson. And back here, that is the bluff. That's the part that's managed by the Nature Conservancy. And all of these mountains are amphibolite mountains. Now, in that range that we just looked at, all of these projectile points and other tools, these are all from Ashe County in the area here. I was able to help the museum recover these from out of the county and get them back here in the county. A family had these and had gotten these. If you want to know more about archaeology, I really recommend meeting Dr. White. She's in the archaeology department. She came out with our students this year and we did atlatl spear throwing out in Durham Park this semester. And they can tell you more about some of these histories and prehistories. But Mount Jefferson, we know that there have been people up here. We found a spear point that's about 8,000 years old. So before the pyramids were built, there were people on Mount Jefferson. We don't know much about their language. We don't know much, well, we don't know anything about their language or what they thought about things, what kind of stories they told. These were the ancestors of the modern tribes like the Cherokee. So kind of like if you've been out west in Utah, the Anasazi, kind of like that idea. The ancient ones would have been making these spear points. And these ones on the far right, those are the types of spear points you would use to take out a mammoth or a mastodon. This is archaeology students from App State University. We took them down a few years ago down to a little alcove on Mount Jefferson to look and to see what they could find with Dr. White, not Dr. Wright, two different professors. And there are spiders in the cave there. It's not really a cave, it's an alcove. So don't start any rumors. It's not a cave, it's an alcove, and it's very difficult to get to. So they were looking down in there and they did find some lamp glass from the 1700s, which partially corroborates another part of our story. And we're going to get into it. And if you're wondering, well, were there any permanent settlements of indigenous people here? They tell most of the time people say no. But if you go up on I-77 north of Wytheville, about 60 miles north of here, you'll find a permanent settlement called Wolf Creek Village. So there were some settlements not very far away from here that were permanent. So the story does change. Sorry for the long pause there. I just wanted to give a chance to look at the pictures a little bit. Yeah, people started to come into the area that were not indigenous to the land, and mainly it was the Spanish explorers. There were 3 forts that we know of in the Appalachians that were Spanish, that the Spanish explorers or conquerors came in and basically built. One of them out near between Hickory and down in that area near 40 was actually a fort that was found, a Spanish fort was found underneath an Indian mound. Apparently the Indians drove the Spanish explorers out of the area and then covered their fort up with an Indian mound. And Dr. White at App State worked on that one. Dr. Wright worked on that site. So as time moves forward, more people came into the area that were European and again, continued to conquer the land here and take the land from the people here, and then drove most famously the Cherokee out of their territory on the Trail of Tears. And today there are 7 tribes in North Carolina that are recognized by the state, including the Lumbee tribe. There's one that's federally recognized, and that's the Cherokee tribe. So these tribes are still here. Their descendants are still here. They're still here on this land, and they still are connected to the land, including up here at Mount Jefferson. As time moved on, more European explorers and conquerors, colonists came into the area, and they developed what was known as the Lost Province. That's the area of Jefferson and West Jefferson in the 17 and 1800s. This was still considered to be a very isolated community back then. Gottlieb Spenglenberg, who is a Moravian bishop, tried to build his main headquarters up here, and he said he was walled in on all sides, and he left and went back to Winston-Salem. He almost was going to build his main headquarters up here, but he didn't. And I put this picture in here just to remind us that in the this was not taken in the 1700s, but in the 1700s, 1800s, we see these black and white pictures and we think somehow it was different than what it is today, but it was, everything was still in color. It was just a different time period. So other people came up on Mount Jefferson, and probably one of the more famous visitors that came up here was Dr. Elijah Mitchell. He kind of clawed his way. There were no roads up here at that time. So he clawed his way to the top of the mountain with this guy who had a big beard. And that's what he wrote in his diary. He said, "Ah, what a vast ocean of mountains." And he said, "I can see the pilot, I can see the grandfather, and I'm going to White Top Mountain." And that's where he was going. That's where he went to after he left Mount Jefferson. So Elijah Mitchell was up here in the 1820s. And there's Mitchell. And his diary is very interesting if you want to read something pretty neat about his trip up here to Ashe County. He also wrote in his diary that he saw many good plants that were new to me, and he dug up some ginseng on Mount Jefferson, which, of course, the first ticket I ever wrote was for somebody poaching ginseng. Now, Mitchell he's okay, no worries, he wasn't breaking any laws then. This was not a park or a natural area back then, but yeah, he actually wrote that he dug up some ginseng here and some wild strawberries when he was on the mountain in 1827. He also wrote that the American chestnut was the dominant tree, and he said, as he rode into Jefferson, the mountains were filled with blossoms of chestnuts. And you can kind of see how different the landscape has changed because of these non-native things that were brought in. Mainly the blight came in and basically took out the American chestnut trees, but we're hoping that they're going to make a comeback. There are several groups that are working, like the American Chestnut Foundation, that are trying to bring the American chestnut tree back, but it was the dominant tree of the Appalachians and up here at Mount Jefferson. At this point, let me just see if there are any questions. Do y'all any questions at this point? Any areas that I have left out or you'd like me to focus on?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Were those mountains named? Was like White Top, and did they already have those names when Mitchell was up here?
Yeah, when Mitchell was here, yeah, he at White Top, I believe White Top was also mentioned in his diary. I believe he did mention White Top by name, and definitely the pilot, though. Pilot Mountain was mentioned and grandfather was mentioned, because at that time period, Mitchell had an argument with some other fella who thought that grandfather was the tallest mountain east of the Mississippi, as opposed to Clingman's or Mount Mitchell, which became Mount Mitchell. And there was also Clingman's Dome was up in the Great Smoky Mountains was another part of that argument. So yes, some of those mountains were already named the names that we have for them now. Yeah, he actually said when he was going to White Top that he ran into a fella. I don't always tell this story, but since you brought up White Top, he said he ran into a guy who was crawling around in subterranean chambers looking for gold, but there was a creature inside the cave that had the head the size of 2 thumbs that kept blowing his candle out. That's in his diary. I am assuming, what is that, like a fairy or a gnome or something? So we've been doing fairy house programs to kind of remember that part of his story. We did those up here in the summertime, but I don't know what that was, but he wrote about it. Mitchell didn't say he saw it, but he said the guy he met saw it. So you meet interesting people on your way to White Top, I guess, when you're going by horseback. So, okay. So yeah, I get a little more about Mitchell. Yeah, well, there it is. I forgot I put that in there. So yeah, that's from 1827, that story. I just I had that up there as well. Well, it's an interesting time to be here in this area. And there's our fairy houses. Yeah. Yeah, he wrote the county swarms with children, was well bitten by fleas at night, and there were no ticks, but an abundance of their brethren, he says. And that's funny. I just had a tick on me the other day. So there are ticks here now. So I'm not sure if that's climate change driven or how that is, but that's one of our fairy houses up, one of the kids making fairy houses to remember that story. Now, another pretty famous person who came up here was Asa Gray. And has anybody heard of Asa Gray before? Yeah, oh, good. Okay. Yeah. So he is a pretty famous botanist, and he was well known for his plants, and he came up to Mount Jefferson. Nobody seemed to know this until later on. And he came up, and so I'm going to ask you, what is Asa Gray, Mount Jefferson, and Professor Snape from Harry Potter? Do you have any idea what they all have in common? And I don't think Professor Snape was a very good teacher, by the way, but that's my opinion. What do you think, Foster?
I was going to say they knew, like, I don't know. I'd say they have a lot of the plant life that they would work with.
Okay, yes, it had to do with plants. Yeah, this connection does have to do. Actually, the plant was, to give you an idea, just a hint, this plant was used in Alaska by indigenous people to hunt for whales. And they didn't use it as a spear.
What is it, like poisonous to them?
It was poisonous. Yeah,
Mhm.
it still is a poisonous plant. Yeah. This is the plant. It's an endemic. It lives on Mount Jefferson, and it's known as monkshood, trailing wolfbane, leopard's-bane. This plant is so poisonous that if you ate it, you'd probably be dead within about 5 hours. Very, very toxic plant. One of many of Mount Jefferson's plants. And I haven't really gotten too far into why we have all these plants and why we're a national natural landmark, other than mentioning the neutral soil. And that's really the big player here. So Asa Gray, he came up here and he took some samples of that trailing wolfbane, that monkshood, and took it back to the Smithsonian. And that's actually a clip from some plants from Mount Jefferson that are in the Smithsonian right now. They are being stored there from Asa Gray's research. And most visitors, when they come to Mount Jefferson, wouldn't realize that the plants that are up here have been actually taken to the Smithsonian. And so what's the connection? Well, Professor Snape asked Harry, what's the difference between monkshood and trailing wolfbane? And he couldn't answer. Well, they're both the same. It was a trick question. There was no, yeah, so he couldn't, there was no, that's why I say I don't think he was a good professor, because he gave him an answer, a question he couldn't answer. So that's the connection there between Mount Jefferson, Snape, and Asa Gray. So the town, if you wonder, well, where is the name coming from? The town was actually named after an earlier visitor to the area that's fairly famous, Peter Jefferson, who was Thomas Jefferson's father. And he came out here and did a lot of the mapping of the area. The area is known as the Lost Province because for a while it wasn't actually claimed by Virginia or North Carolina. It was kind of on its own. It wasn't in either state, or at least it wasn't thought to be. Another part of our mountains history has to do with the Underground Railroad. Some of y'all might have heard that this has been a stopover for the Underground Railroad. And the follow the drinking gourd is the Big Dipper. That would be what you would, in the song, follow the drinking gourd, you would follow the drinking gourd. It would lead you to the North Star if you knew how to use the stars to navigate. And that would be if you were a slave trying to head toward freedom, you would follow the North Star. And there is a strong oral tradition here in Mount Jefferson that that there were routes of the Underground Railroad that came through here, and people did assist with helping slaves go north. If you were going to help somebody with that, you would basically be hung if somebody found out about it, because it was at the very least civil disobedience. So we don't have anything written. There's no written history of it. There's just a very strong oral tradition about it. And these are some of the routes that you can see. And one of the routes comes pretty close to Mount Jefferson. It goes right across through Tennessee, right up through Ashe County. And so since this has been a story that's been told by generation to generation, a lot of the kids that have grown up here know about this story. And one of the students wrote a poem about the Underground Railroad a few years ago in our poetry contest.
Callie Phipps, and I received second place in the Mount Jefferson Poetry Contest. My poem is entitled, "The Night is Still, Quiet, Peaceful." The night is still, quiet, peaceful. A gentle breeze blows through the trees and echoes through the hollow cliff where I stay. If I could sleep, I would, but I never sleep very much. I am unable to escape. Escape the night they came, the night they came for me. The night the wind howled, but all I could hear was footsteps, footsteps pounding. All I could see was the light from their lanterns. What I could feel was my heart pounding, pounding inside my chest. They passed by me. I will stay here as long as I have to. I will stay on this mountain, which will later be called Mount Jefferson.
Anything you want to add about what inspired you on that?
What inspired me on this poem was I'd always been a constant visitor of Mount Jefferson. My brother used to bring me up here when I was really little, and he used to tell me about the slaves that would hide in the cliffs and in the caves. And I just wanted to look into that and get some insight on what it must have felt like to hide on a mountain for a long time. Thank you.
So yeah, and that student, by the way, she went on to graduate high school, and she would bring her friends up here, and she's still a friend of Mount Jefferson, and as pretty much a lot of the poets are. And we still don't know one way or the other about the Underground Railroad coming through here. We don't have any definitive answers. We just have a strong oral history. So time continues to roll on, and the Civil War comes and goes. You know, the slavery is abolished in the United States, and a train starts to come into the area. Came from Abington. At that time, it was the highest train east of the Rockies, and went from Abington out into Lansing, and then down into Jefferson, and then out to Todd, where it would turn around. And that was called the Virginia Creeper, which is now a rails to trails line that you can go biking on, which is really fun if you're kind of interested in that. So moving on, more people coming to the area. We finally get up into the 1930s, and the Great Depression hits. And in the Great Depression, there was a program called the WPA and the Civilian Conservation Corps. And the WPA was asked if they could build a road to the top of this mountain. Remember, it's kind of like, oh, Mount Jefferson. Yeah. So they built the road all the way to the top of Mount Jefferson. And the reason they could do that, because there was 18 acres at the top that was public land. So they built the road all the way to the top, and it was a gravel road. And that first overlook you come to at Mount Jefferson was one of the original overlooks, just like Jefferson Overlook was one of the original overlooks. That's the first overlook you come to, which is now paved. And you can see there's less trees up there, but that was from 1939 after the road was built. And there's the bluff there in the background. You can kind of see it. So the last remnant of the WPA road is that little section of trail that goes from the picnic shelter up to the summit, up to the 18 acres that was originally state owned. Now the community asked the WPA to come back and fix the road when it started to collapse, and the WPA said, sorry, we just build roads, we don't fix roads. So the county said, well, why don't we make this thing into a state park? They went to Raleigh, and Raleigh said, no, you can't be a state park, sorry. You have to have at least 400 acres minimum. They only had 18. So they went back, they started asking people to donate money, donate land. World War II came and went. And finally in 1956, Mount Jefferson became a state park. Now keep in mind, Mount Jefferson prior to 1956 had a different name. It was Negro Mountain, but it wasn't actually Negro Mountain. It was the more culturally less sensitive name. That was actually the name on the maps, and you still find maps with that name on it. going back prior to 1956. Also keep in mind in 1956, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia state parks were all segregated. So they were African-American only park, white only parks. That was the way the parks were. There were actually parks in Virginia where one lake was for African-American, one was for white. So part of the reason I think they might have changed the name from Negro Mountain to Mount Jefferson in 1956, and that's when the name changed, was to kind of get an idea that it was not going to be a segregated park, because that was changing in the 1950s and early 60s. That was changing a lot in the United States. So the name, if you had been up there before 1956 on the Parkway, you would have seen that overlook was called Negro Mountain State Park, or just Negro Mountain Overlook was what it was called. And then they changed it to Mount Jefferson, just to kind of get an idea of how these histories have changed over time. So some of the plants that are up here, and I haven't really dove too deeply into that, but the plants that are up here right now, we estimate that there are over 750 different species of plants that are on Mount Jefferson. And that is a lot. And the reason why we have so many plants up here goes back to this amphibolite rock that we started with those volcanoes a long time ago. That amphibolite rock, when it breaks down, it changes the pH of the soil. If you remember, I mentioned pH, and that soil is more neutral than most of the surrounding mountains. And that neutral soil allows for a real diversity of plants. This is bloodroot. This is the plant you'll look for in the spring. It comes up, it's one of the first flowers to come up in springtime. And there's the bloodroot flower. It's one of my favorites to see because I know spring is on its way. And we do have bears from time to time up on Mount Jefferson. That's from near the park office. So just a few of the plants kind of to see. Also, Carolina hemlock is another one we have up here. So Mount Jefferson's Maffick Glade and other 750 species, probably who really brought this to our attention, besides it becoming a national natural landmark, was a student from Appalachian State. A few years ago, he came up here. His name is Derek Poindexter. Since he's come up here, he's earned his master's degree at App State, and then he's gone on to Chapel Hill and got his doctorate. But he spent 3 years trying to identify all the plants on Mount Jefferson, and he got the number to over 750. It was only 450 or so when he started. And many a time, Derek had disappeared for the day, and we thought he was never coming back. We thought, okay, there's his truck. He's probably fallen off the mountain somewhere, but he always came back. He always did. We're always happy about that. So in 1974, Mount Jefferson became a national natural landmark, recognized by the Department of Interior because of our plant diversity. Having all these plants, because of that amphibolite soil, allows for more diversity. The road then continued to be improved over time. It's, of course, paved all the way to the top. We still do have snow, so we still have frost wedging. We still have rocks that fall into the road. Some mornings you'll find them the size of a bowling ball out in the middle of the road, sometimes even bigger than that, just out laying in the road. And we still, of course, have visitors coming up here and enjoying the view, especially in the fall. And we do night hikes. We did program planning a couple of weeks ago, and we had a night hike. We took some students up to Luther Rock, just like there, to look at the full moon. We watched the full moon rise where everybody else was watching that big football game that went on. They were saying, we don't like football. We're going to go on the night hike. So I was like, that's fine with me. Let's go. So that's from Luther Rock and looking down on the town of Jefferson. And then White Top up there in the distance, you can see it behind that mountain in the foreground, which is Phoenix Mountain. Again, there's from Luther Rock, White Top there in the background in Virginia. That little mountain there is called the Peak, and it's a part of Wagner Access's New River State Park. It's now a section that's been purchased, and now you can camp up in there. You can hike up there and camp if you want. So farming is still a big thing around our mountain, around your mountain, and the community is still continuing to change and grow. And we're now over 1,000 acres in size. Remember, we started at 18 acres. Now we're over 1,000 acres, and we've got a really cool sign now we got put up a few years ago. One of the big things that go on in Mount Jefferson is we have continuing research. And I started a few years ago a lichen air quality study, and lichens are basically algae and fungus. I tell the kids Alice algae and Freddie fungus took a lichen to each other. It's a symbiotic relationship, the algae and the fungus working together. They're kind of like the canary in a coal mine. If the air quality turns bad, then the lichens don't survive. So we took about 80 samples, pictures of 80 samples around the park, and we go back and monitor them and see how they're doing, kind of like you would with a coral reef. And so far, the air quality looks like it's really good. And we do continuing to have education about the lichens. Several new trails have been built on Mount Jefferson. The AmeriCorps program has built several trails. We have now one that parallels the main road, goes all the way from the office to the top. That was not here a few years ago. And all of our overlooks are still available. I mentioned Derek's work. This is Derek Poindexter's work. If you're interested in getting more information about Mount Jefferson, it's about I guess about 100-page. It's a very long, does it say how long it is? It's a fairly long dissertation, but you can get it online for free if you put in vascular flora of Mount Jefferson. It also has a lot of really good history if you want to read more about Derek's work. And Derek collected 750 samples, and we have an herbarium here on the park and on campus at App State. There's an herbarium there that has all 750 pressed samples with the common name and the Latin name. So we do have poetry contests, and this, as we kind of wind up, I thought this is one of my favorite poems that was written a few years ago by a poet who really realized that Mount Jefferson belonged to her.
Hi, I'm Emerson Rails, and I won the Gifted Writers in Mount Jefferson Poem Contest of 2010. This is my poem. The Feelings. On Mount Jefferson I feel free, wild and peaceful at the same time. I feel happy when I see the different varieties of plants, flowers, and butterflies. So spellbinding they are. The tune of the birds and the pitter-patter of the squirrels and chipmunks looking for nuts is nature's music. I feel microscopic like a tiny bug when I look at the land before me. I feel different on this mountain, but in a good way. I feel wonderful when the wind blows through my hair and I close my eyes and smell the sharp, fresh air. And when I'm at the peak, I look down and feel like the king of the world. I own this mountain. Everyone does. I will protect this land. I will protect it so it will feel as happy as I do.
That poem always puts a smile on my face and in my heart. So she did a really good job on that one. I guess she's graduated from school too now. So yeah. So Mount Jefferson has got a long history. Goes back 300 million years, and it's still going forward, this island in the sky. We still have wildlife up here as winter's approaching. Some amazing views. And that's what most people see. They come up from Florida or different places and say, oh, look at the beautiful view. And they leave. But hopefully now you're going to have a lot better understanding of what Mount Jefferson is, and a little bit about its story and its ongoing future. So thank you very much. And if you have questions, please feel free to ask.
I've got one.
Yes.
Do you know the milepost number where the sign is for Mount Jefferson, where you can see it?
No, I don't. I don't know the milepost number. I could say, well, that's a federal question. That's on the Blue Ridge Parkway. I'm state, but we could probably find that out. It is, if I'm not really exactly sure which side of Jeffries Park it's on, but it is up there. So I mean, if you go,
Is it on Jeffers Park? Is that where it is?
no, it's not. No, I used that kind of as a landmark. I could say this: it's either north or south of it, of Jeffers Park. I'm sorry, I don't actually. I bet we could find it, but I don't have that. That's a good. I always like to be stumped at the end of the program. I could make it up and say 183 or 127. No, I won't do that. I know we've got all these students here. Let's ask the App State students to find out. They should find out and then tell you what that is. So that's why we have students here. Right, Taylor? Okay. Well, any other questions besides ones I can't answer? Okay. Okay. Well, it's been a real pleasure.
Another one.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you said there's the new trails. There's the trail from the bottom up. Are the new
Mhm.
trails at the top, or where are the new trails?
Yes. Well, the new trail is from basically the park office up to all the different overlooks, and then it ends at the picnic shelter,
And
basically.
how long the walk? I've driven it, but how long the walk is that?
That's a 2-mile hike uphill. Yeah. So it's 2 miles to get to the top. And then once you're at the top, it's a 1.1 mile loop to Luther Rock. And then you can add another 7/10 of a mile on the Lost Province Trail, which is a second loop that's beyond the first loop. So you could do like maybe 6 miles if you did the whole thing, 6 to 7 miles round trip. And we have people that do that. They park at the office and they're gone all day and then they come back. So, yeah.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, we'd like to wrap up. Thank you all for joining us today. And we'd also like to give a special thanks to Ranger Randolph for taking time out of his day, delivering a great informative presentation. I know I learned a lot, so I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And yeah. Well, thank you so much. And I hope y'all have a great rest of the afternoon. And for the students, have a great rest of your semester.
Thanks. Bye.
Wait, just a reminder, we have a poll at the end of this. I'm gonna put it on your screens right now. If you would like to do this real quick, it's only 3 questions.
Is it okay if I pull out?
Yeah.
Okay.
that's fine.
All right. Y'all have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks.
Let's see, let's do one.
All right. Thank you for taking our poll. Thank you for also coming to our High Countries Lifelong Learners event.
Well done. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, how'd that feel?
It was pretty good.
Pretty good. I really enjoyed his talk. It's very interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've never heard any of that as well. So I was excited.
I'm glad it turned out. It was really good. I missed hearing his programs. He's just like, he's a great storyteller, so that helps.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I got to skedaddle off to class. So good job, you guys. And good job, Salem, but he dipped out.
And we'll see you all on Friday for our debrief.
Yes.
All right. Have a great week, everybody.
You
Okay,
too.
bye, guys.
Bye, guys.